Thank you for attending the special call board meeting, and we have one item on the agenda. We have a quorum, and I will ask Mr. Henson, because you're front and center, to lead us on the pledge, please. Thank you, Mr. Henson. Right, we have a super short agenda tonight. We are here to discuss the approval of recommendation for Strive Collegiate Academy amended charter application. That is the only item that is on our agenda tonight. So, board members, I will encourage you that all conversations tonight, please relate it to this application. So, we will turn it over to Dr. Register. Do you have any comments before we turn it over to Mr. Dr. Coverstone?
Coverstone.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right, thank you. I appreciate you all being here at an extra meeting. I understand that that's an imposition on you, and I especially appreciate Ms. Mays being here. Thank you very much. Thanks for letting me provide a little context tonight. I know this is a challenging proposal and one that has generated some miscommunication, and I want to make sure that we leave everyone clear on the details before you actually have to vote. First thing we need to be clear on is that Tennessee law requires school boards to act on every charter application and resubmission within specific timelines. Failure to take action by resolution within the legally allotted times results in approval of the applications without any further actions. The MMPS board is free to consider or not to consider anything it finds to be relevant in judging the best interests of the students, the district, or the community. This consideration is inclusive of the articulated needs as well as fiscal impact. If you vote to deny, the decision you make is subject to appeal to the state board, and they will decide whether they agree with your assessment of the best interests of the students, the district, and the community. If they disagree, they will authorize and open the school. The law gives heavy presumption to charter applications. We created a charter schools office and a charter school review process to address the concern that this presumption would lead to opening a large number of charter schools that were poor and would harm students. As I've mentioned frequently, our process, its objectivity and professionalism, and its ability to separate questions of quality from political questions that sometimes come up, has enabled us to prevent over 30 schools, including 2 this cycle, from operating that would likely have been poor. Our efforts have also helped to close 4 low-performing schools and left us with a group of charters that are adding dramatically to our district's ambitious academic goals for 2018. In short, this work has prevented the unabated charter growth that we sometimes fear, and that growth would otherwise have undermined the financial capacity of the district and probably threatened the credit rating of the city, as we've seen in other places that have not had objective quality-based review. The review process is in place so that the MMPS Board of Education has objective and reliable information regarding all aspects of their decisions regarding whether to approve or deny an application. We rely on a diverse and experienced committee using a detailed rubric approved by the state and producing an objective assessment of the school's potential to fulfill its promises regarding academic, organizational, and financial quality. In this case, the applicant's resubmission addressed the committee's original concerns fully, as detailed in the recommendation report that you received last week. Our office then verifies the commitments to academic excellence and diversity, ensuring their enforcement through our annual academic, operational, and performance evaluations that are delivered to this board annually and publicly made available on the Office of Innovation website. Finally, we considered the board's articulation of needs in this year's resolution. We could simply recommend denial on the grounds of an exclusive resolution. No one questions whether the explicit needs listed in the resolution are advanced by this application. They're not. That same resolution places a restriction on the board. It says the board will only consider those needs and those specific exceptions the needs articulated in the resolution and the specific exceptions articulated in the high school growth clause. Whether you choose to approve a school that aims to serve other needs is up to you. You pass the resolution and its restrictions limit the board. However, I believe I owe it to you to analyze the applicant's arguments regarding need, since those arguments will determine how strong the foundation of your potential denial will be. If an applicant articulates needs that align with the best interests of the students, the district, or the community, then the State Board of Education will almost certainly grant their appeal, and the school will open. Our job is to analyze the competing needs assessment and give you honest, clear, and actionable advice regarding the likelihood that the school will prevail on appeal. You're still free to vote however you choose. Our job is to be sure that you have the full picture before voting so that you can vote with your eyes open and genuinely consider the best interests of the students, the district, and the community as the law requires. Applicants clearly within the needs that you articulated in the resolution can count on approval. Those outside the expressed needs face a heavy presumption against approval and an obligation to demonstrate a need that is consistent with the best interests of the students, the district, and the community in order to have any chance of winning approval on appeal. So has this application done that? Apologize, I got ahead slide-wise. The resolution says that the board will only consider applications that propose to serve cluster tiers projected over 120% of capacity in 2017 or to convert management of a low-performing school. This applicant argues that while the articulated need is important, it is not the only one that aligns with the best interests of the students, the district, and the community. The applicant proposes to build a middle school in the McGavock cluster where all 4 existing middle schools are projected to exceed 100% capacity in 2017, and 3 of the 4 schools from which students will be drawn are rated target or review by the most recent MMPS academic performance framework. This slide shows the 4 middle schools in the McGavock cluster and their projected 2017-18 enrollment. You should have this in what was sent out. You can see that the cluster tier enrollment projection is 106.8% across the 4 schools. This slide uses the same fiscal capacity analysis we used for the Overton and Glencliff clusters at the last approval meeting, only this analysis looks at the impact of 1 new middle school within the McGavock cluster. Here you can see that the proposed school almost exactly meets the student enrollment needs that are projected, and the cost of meeting those growth needs is almost the same as the investment in the proposed school. An argument for negative fiscal impact will be difficult to sustain when proposed spending is in line with new student growth. Finally, this slide shows that the academic need in the cluster exists and supports a strong argument that denial may not be in the best interests of the students. The MMPS Board of Education resolution, as well as state law, acknowledges the importance of the quality standards approved by the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, one of which is a quality authorizer broadly invites and solicits charter applications while publicizing the authorizer's strategic vision and chartering priorities, without restricting or refusing to review applications that propose to fulfill other goals. When an applicant proposes to fulfill other goals, the burden to demonstrate the need for the school falls squarely on the applicant. This proposal, however, likely satisfies that burden. This application has been vetted by a rigorous quality review process and found to be ready to operate at excellence. Its absolute commitment to strong academic outcomes and diversity are well established and enforceable by virtue of the commitments within the charter application. In this case, the applicant has made a convincing case that approval of a new school in this cluster will actually advance the same goals as those identified by the board and within this year's call for proposals. Serving students in overcrowded schools and advancing quality options where academic performance has lagged are the goals in the resolution, and they are the goals advanced in this application. The definitions of overcrowding and the strategy of management conversion are the only differences. Denying this application solely on the grounds of an exclusive articulation of need by board resolution would therefore likely be judged contrary to the best interests of the students in the schools that are overcrowded and the students where academic performance lags. A decision to deny would almost certainly be reversed on appeal. The district's interest in matching all new school investments with narrowly articulated needs would be balanced against the needs advanced by the applicant and evaluated for your information here. It's difficult to imagine that the State Board would support a decision to deny on this basis. And that is in part why we are recommending that you suspend the restrictions you placed on yourselves in the resolution and consider this application and vote to approve. The application will represent the first and only charter school within the McGavock cluster. The cluster's population is strong and growing, and enrollment in every middle school in the cluster will exceed capacity while the academic performance of some middle schools lags. The applicant in this case has demonstrated a need, and approval is therefore not contrary to the best interests of the students, district, and the community. Bottom line is, this will be a good school for kids. It will not break the bank. It's better to have them in the district, and it's time to stop fighting.
Thank you, Mr. Coverstone. I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the recommendation for Strive Collegiate Academy amended charter application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. And since I know everybody has some discussion items, we will start with Dr. Brannon and work our way around. Dr. Brannon?
Not yet.
Okay, Ms. Spearing?
Yes. Our first charter school opened in 2003, and for the next 10 years, we opened another 20-plus schools. During this time, we, as a board, not Allen's office, offered no concrete guidelines about the particular needs of our district to support charter school applicants. Consequently, we have pockets of saturation of charter schools in East Nashville. On November the 12th, 2013, under Will Pinkston's leadership, our board passed an unprecedented resolution, which I argue, and will argue in just a moment, is policy, which clearly articulates the needs of our district, offers guidelines, and establishes priorities for accepting new applications for charter schools. After attending our governance meeting on Tuesday, it appeared to me that the point of contention is a resolution worth any more than the paper it's written on, or is it actually policy? And I've heard it said by some in this room that a resolution is not binding. But no one's ever backed up that premise with Robert's Rules of Order. So I want to present a few citations that indicate that a resolution carries the same weight as a regular motion made on the floor, but perhaps it's even more important. On page 33 of Robert's Rules of Orders, the 11th edition, I quote, and it's under making a motion, for more important or complicated questions, or when greater formality is desired, he presents the motion in form of a resolution. Therefore, a resolution is a complex motion. Throughout this book, there are many references to resolutions. But on page 105, I want to read to you, again, this is under motion submitted in writing, resolutions. As previously stated, a main motion, particularly an original main motion, is frequently offered as a resolution, either because of its importance, because of its length, or because of its complexity. Any resolution, well, then it goes on to explain that it should be in writing. And then it says, it is often advisable to consult with members who can be of assistance in perfecting it, and also with those whose support is likely to be necessary for its adoption, which Will did when the resolution was written. He worked with Alan Coverstone's office, and he worked with Dr. Register. Even the media, the Scene and the Tennessean, refer to this resolution as policy because it was passed by this board. Yesterday, I talked to Mr. Green at TSBA, Tennessee School Board Association, about our resolution for approving charter schools. And he said that if the intent of this board was that the parameters of this resolution would be used as official guidelines and offer priorities to select future charter schools, it is indeed policy. Recently, I brought a motion to limit the number of items on the consent agenda. When this motion passed, it became policy. But when administration brought a new agenda recently with more than 40 items, we voted to suspend the rules because the motion that had passed was now policy. We are a policy-making board. The intent of this board, the intent of this resolution, the intent of this policy was to ensure and communicate to charter applicants specificity on location, specificity on types of schools our system needs, which should be given priority. I think it goes without saying that those seeking a charter with Metro schools must use this policy when they write applications. Otherwise, why are we here? We're representing the voters, we're representing our districts, and this is important work that we're doing, and our motions are important. So that's all I have to say at this time.
Ms. Kim?
Couple thoughts. I mean, I admit I am not attuned to the finer points of Robert's Rules of Order, and nor very frankly motivated by them. The thing that I am, though, really motivated by is the notion that all kids can learn, and that if given the right opportunities, they're going to, and they're going to be able to then to achieve whatever dreams that they set for themselves. So against the backdrop of things happening across our country, whether it's Ferguson or whether you look right here in Metro Nashville Public Schools and see in East Nashville, in my own district, that, it's still true that 30% of third graders can read on grade level. That overwhelms everything. Finer points of policy, finer points of Robert's rules. And I think the Strive application is interesting. I mean, I'm excited by this application because I believe that the parents and the kids of that particular cluster that Strive is hoping to open in is going to welcome the options, the academic options that Strive is going to provide. And so I've been, pondering a few different things in light of this upcoming vote. It's interesting that today the state of Tennessee just published the reward schools list, which lists the best schools in the state on two different dimensions, one on absolute achievement, and then the second one on academic growth. Best schools in the state. And 18 MMPS schools got on that list. And what's interesting about that is 7 of them are charter schools, which means that 39% of all the reward schools, again, some of the best schools in the entire state, are charters. And the only reason that's even relevant in this particular context, and the reason why I bring it up, is because it points to a very central thing that matters deeply to this whole discussion, which is, are we actually any good as a district, and is the Office of Innovation any good at, in fact, recruiting, selecting, authorizing, and then launching charter schools? That's what matters, and that's what we're trying to vote on today, because if we think their record is good, then we will vote yes. If we think they're not, we should absolutely resoundingly say no. And the reality is that when you look at a stat like that, where 12% of schools in the district are charters, but then 12% of the schools in the district are charters, and yet 39% of the reward schools are in fact charters, I would say the answer to that question that I just posed is a resounding yes. That in fact, the Office of Innovation does in fact know what they're doing, and that they know how to select schools that are very likely to put kids on a totally different trajectory, which is exactly what I'm motivated by. So that's one thought. The other thought is something sort of building off what you brought up, Dr. Coverstone, in the slides. I mean, we're all about, I believe that all of us here at this table are about providing life-changing opportunities for all of our kids. This is literally our reason for being as a board. And then yet it is true, as you pointed out in this slide right up here, is that despite the hard work of a lot of really great people, we're just not quite there yet across our city. We could get there, but we're not there yet. And that's true of this particular cluster that Strive is proposing to open their school. And so, I just talked a little bit about the reward side of things, the top schools in the state. Well, the state also produces what we know is the priority and focus schools across the state. So the priority schools are the bottom 5% of schools in the state, and then the focus schools are those schools which are struggling massively to close the gap between kids, for example, from disadvantaged backgrounds and kids who come from economically advantaged backgrounds. And so when you look at those stats, it's interesting. There are 23 schools in MMPS that are either priority and focus. And this year there's no overlap between those lists. There's 23 distinct schools that are in one of those buckets. And when you look at specifically within the cluster that Strive is looking to locate, 25% of the schools in that particular cluster are either on the priority or focus list. And so to underscore Dr. Coverstone's point, there is a real academic need there. And to use our own academic performance framework, none of the schools in the cluster right now are in the top 2 performing buckets, known as excelling and achieving. And what's interesting, well, except for Stanford Elementary, which, though, is a restricted GPZ school, which has an extensive waiting list because it is a top-performing school, and parents are literally lining up, waiting to get into that building. They can't handle the applications that they get each year. And so all that data, all that tells me is that, parents know a good school when they see one. They're lining up, in fact, to get into one. There is a need in that particular cluster for quality seats. The parents are clamoring for it. Kids want to get into those schools. And in this instance, again, we have a process that has vetted this particular school and deemed it, able, ready, prepared to, in fact, provide an excellent education for our kids. But even for a second, we just assume that we don't really even care about student achievement. We actually don't care about the quality of seat. We don't care about what parents want. We don't care about any of that. It is also true from just a population growth perspective, again, to underscore the point that this cluster is the largest in MMPS at 9,500 students, and it is growing. And as Dr. Coverstone noted already, we are on track to exceeding our capacity by 2017, which is right around the corner. So even if you don't care about all the things that I just outlined, although I know we care about all those things, it is also true we literally need to have seats for our kids. And so in that sense, Strive also meets a deep need of the district. And then my final point is that, we've talked a lot about this on the board floor, is just the critical role that leadership plays in all of our schools. We know that we need a CEO, a top CEO in every single one of the 150 plus schools that we run. And in this instance, we have a woman, Lakendra Butler, who grew up in the KIPP network. And KIPP, as we know, has in fact been on the reward school list for the last 2 years in a row, has produced some of the best growth in the entire state and is recognized as such, is an excelling school on our own exact academic performance framework. And that KIPP DNA, which Lakendra has running through her blood, is going to pay dividends for us. We have, in other words, a network that's trained up a leader, a network that has produced incredible results and has trained up a leader who is now proposed to run this school. And we know that leadership is everything when we talk about actually launching, running, and successfully ensuring that our kids get the opportunities that they deserve. So I think all in sum, and then I will move it on, Cheryl, that, when I think about what we're here to do as a board, which is number one, first and foremost, to give our kids amazing opportunities, academic opportunities that will put them on a different track in life. It is awesome to think about the fact that we have an authorization process, unlike many urban districts in the country, who actually have it right, who know how to pick the winners, and the record absolutely shows that. And so it's incredible that we have this opportunity then to usher in this school and to give, those choices to our kids. It will help us meet our very grandest aspirations for our own kids' dreams and helping them meet them, but it also helps us meet our own obligations in terms of providing actual seats in a growing cluster. So you might be able to tell how I might vote.
No, really? Ms. Shepherd.
I'll defer. I'll go after.
Mr. Pinkston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a lot of questions for Dr. Coverstone, and then got some comments. I'm probably going to the different bites. I guess the first question I've got is for Dr. Register. We had a spirited discussion in Governance Committee the other night, and I asked then, and I'm going to renew the question now, what your recommendation is on this. You routinely make recommendations to us on all matters that come before the board: contracts, compensation, teacher dismissals, capital needs, other new schools. So I'd like to know what's your recommendation here. Should we vote it up or down?
Madam Chair, if I may, I'll make some comments and we'll make a recommendation, but I would like to make some preliminary comments before I do that. And I want to go back and review where this application's come and what my engagement's been in this. The application was originally denied by the committee, and there were areas of weakness in the application, and I agreed with those. And then the other issue was whether or not the application met the priorities of the board, and I had a question about that. And I also suggested to the leader of the Charter Collaborative that it might be appropriate for this application to be withheld for a year, to be given further consideration and submitted in another year. That advice was not followed, and the application was submitted for appeal. The appeal process was submitted, and subsequently the appeal was found to be satisfactory, and was recommended by the committee. As I said the other night when I was not expecting to have this discussion, that I accepted that recommendation and decided not to form my own opinion, or not to, more specifically, not to reverse or recommend denial in the face of that recommended approval from the committee. Still had a concern about board priorities, the issue of the board priorities, and frankly felt like it was something that was important for the board to act on, because it was the board's resolution and the board's priorities and yours to determine whether or not you felt the application fit this process. After the events of this week, one, again, looking at the intent and the focus of the application from Strive, I see that there is an intent and a focus to serve low-performing schools and students. And I think that's important. And our data's also come out. We do have 2 middle schools in the area that have been identified as focus middle schools now. 2 Rivers and DuPont Tyler, and a priority school in the zone, Napier Elementary School. So my determination is that Strive can add value to the district work priorities, that it can add value to the work that we're doing in the district. I also have a real concern that my preference would be for the local Board of Education to be the authorizer. I would much prefer having that kind of working relationship with a new charter school than one approved by the State Board of Education, in which that charter would be essentially removed from the district and operated by the statewide charter authorizer. I think that's a very significant issue that I think members of this board should consider as we go forward. So it is my recommendation to the board that the board approve the charter.
Thank you, Dr. Register. Mr. Pinkston?
Okay, thank you for the clarity. So, Dr. Coverstone, your presentation points out that we've got 3 middle schools in that cluster that need improvement according to the academic performance framework. Meanwhile, as Ms. Kim pointed out, according to the state of Tennessee, as of this week, we have tripled the number of priority schools in this district, the lowest performing schools in the state, and none of them are in the McGavock cluster. So the point that I'm trying to make here is there are other areas of town with more acute academic problems, and I think if this operator really wanted to help, they would have dropped in an application to convert one of those priority middle schools elsewhere in the county. Second thing I want to observe is your presentation states that we'll be spending $3.5 million to add additional seats in the McGavock cluster to accommodate projected growth by 2017. Yet, oddly, when I look at the MNPS capital budget projections, which we approved in January of this year, and which go through the year 2024, it does not reflect or plan for a single seat of additional capacity in the McGavock Middle School tier. So, but what the capital budget does reflect is $39.9 million worth of new seats in the Glencliff and Overton cluster elementary tiers, which, as you know, are the ones that were called out by the resolution that was developed with your input and your input. So what's the discrepancy? Did you talk to the facilities folks before cooking up that number that you showed us a minute ago? Because it's not reflected in the capital plan anymore at any point. And if everyone's in agreement that we need to be suddenly adding seats in the McGavock cluster middle tier, then that needs to come to the board via the Capital Needs Committee, not in some disconnected way from the Charter Review Panel. So I'll stop there and see if I can get an answer to that question first.
Well, I mean, if you're going to build a new school, the capital needs would be the process. If you're going to add seats this way, then the charter review process would be the way to do that, I think.
No, the point is we have a very sophisticated, I'm told by Dr. Register, capital needs program that plans for growth a decade in advance. And what I'm telling you is if you look at that document that also comes from management, there's not a single seat being contemplated adding in that middle school tier in that cluster over the next decade. So why are you all of a sudden telling us that we have to add $3.5 million or $3 million worth of seats there when?
Because there's that need for student growth in that area. to the tune of that number of seats. That's in the document that's used to determine the capacity and need and feeds into capital as well as charter school decisions, as well as zoning decisions and all the decisions we make.
So why isn't this coming to us from our facilities team which articulates capital needs? Why is this coming to us from you?
Because this is an alternative to building a new school.
All right, well, I would submit we don't need to add capacity there because our long-term projections have shown that we don't need it. And I appreciate your individual opinion, but until it comes to the capital needs and then comes to the board, as far as I'm concerned, we're not in need of additional capacity there. Finally, and then I'll pause and let others dive in here. Step us through in detail, Dr. Coverstone, everything that happened since this application was denied a couple of months ago. I want, what was your conversation with the applicant after that? When did they submit a revised proposal? What date or dates did the review team meet to review the revised proposal? Who was part of the review? Were the reviewers different than the original review team? Are there meetings from the minutes? And the reason I'm asking is this recommendation is a 180-degree turn from where we were just 60 days ago, and I think we probably need some insight into the process so we can better understand the epiphany that apparently happened here.
Okay. It was re-reviewed by the same review committee.
When?
I don't know the exact dates. Do you have the exact dates?
And I think it was June 24th because that's when you contacted me, Carol.
It has to be submitted within 30 days of the denial, and that was the 24th. And then we have 30 days to renew it, which ends this Saturday.
Step us through the calendar. I think we approved and denied on June 24th, correct?
I don't have the calendar in front of me, so within 30 days of the denial, the resubmission was received, and within 30 days, which ends on Saturday, the board has to take action. And we can get those exact dates if you'd like, but I don't have them at hand.
Well, we're being asked to approve this thing tonight. I think we're entitled to know, the details of what has happened over the last couple of months that has resulted in this dramatic reversal. So can we stop for a second and get that information?
We can move ahead with your next questions, and we can get that information to you.
All right, so while they're looking for that, let me just remind people that the conversation about the resolution, aka the policy that the board passed in November, the root of this was about fiscal and operational sustainability. At a time when the school system's budget overall has been growing at an average annual rate of around 4%, cash outlays for charter schools during the same period has been growing at nearly a rate of 50%. Anyone who's been around government knows that that's unsustainable, and that is what triggered the discussion around setting priorities. So unless we're going to start generating significant new revenue, i.e. taxes, or unless we're prepared to make significant cuts, including closing some traditional failing schools, then it's not sustainable. And Ms. Kim, I appreciate your enthusiasm, and I want to challenge you to articulate the offsetting cuts that are going to be required if we're going to keep approving new schools of any type at an unabated rate. So back to my questions. What was the timeline? Do we know that yet?
30 days after your action was the deadline. That was around.
And our action was, remind me, June?
They originally denied Strive on
Probably 7/24 was the.
Yeah.
July 24th was the resubmission. It was received.
Okay.
Yeah, went to the committee that day.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's okay. It went to the committee that day. The committee individually reviewed it, turned in individual rubrics to their team lead. The team itself met with their team lead and me on August 4th. They made their recommendations. The team lead wrote them up and got them to me within about 2 days.
Okay, so this was buttoned up basically by the end of July, essentially, this recommendation?
No.
August 4th. Okay. All right, I've got more, but I'll stop for a minute and let others chime in.
Mr. Hayes?
Just, I'm looking at the date on the document that was submitted to us, and it's July 24th was the submission date, so you should have had that.
Well, I didn't get it until.
Right. I concur with what a lot of Mrs. Kim so thoughtfully articulated. Thank you. You raised a question, Mr. Pinkston, around capital improvement budget and capital improvement committee, and you know, you've probably heard me say on this floor that I don't have as much faith and confidence in our growth projections as our director does. I think that we are woefully underestimating demand throughout the district. And you saw that with you know, my cluster and Waverly Belmont, where when we began the discussion around a new school, the projections for growth were meanwhile, we have when you look at every other agency that works in this district and this county, it's for growth like we have never seen before. I also think that if we, and you've heard me say this before, if we do what we say we're going to do, if we become the first choice for Davidson County residents, we have about a 70% market share. There are 30,000 plus kids that are in private school that may make a choice to come back. They've fled because of various reasons. So as I look at the potential for growth, if I look at the demographic trends, if I look at net migration into the city, the numbers that Mr. Coverstone has submitted to us around growth, to me, appear incredibly low. And my job the last 20 years, this is where I've spent my career, is understanding growth and how cities grow and move. We will see more growth than what has been shown here. We will have, absent this or other options, if we continue to perform as a district, we'll have a lot of kids in portables. I don't think that's an optimal learning environment for children. Can it work? Absolutely. Does it work well? We can say yes or no. I think about what's in the best interest of all kids, and I think about the growth and the growth that we've seen throughout all of our charters. And if we look at what the charters have done for us as a district, to your point, you know, 7 of our top performing schools district-wide are charters. The charters have really helped to elevate our scores as a district. At the school level, too, I mean, this is an opportunity to bring in an incredibly high-performing school that would serve the residents of this community incredibly well. I could go on and on about why I like it. I'm certainly curious around the law. And there are questions about whether or not our, you know, as we think about Robert's rules, I thought about it, thought about your statements around policy. I don't know that a non-binding resolution trumps state law. And when I look at what we have to vote on it. We have to vote up or down. Can it help guide how people apply? Absolutely. I'm thrilled that most of the people, 95%, applied to open schools that would meet our criteria. But in reading through the entire application, the amended application, the budgets, this appears to be a school that would help us meet our academic needs throughout the district. It would serve the students well. It would help with the growth pressures that I am sure we will have. So I would hope that you, as my colleagues, would take all of that into consideration as we discuss this evening.
Ms. Froak?
Last fall, Will Pinkston worked with Dr. Register and Dr. Coverstone to develop a resolution that would direct charter growth this year. The resolution directed both the board and MNPS management to consider only charter applications that A, propose conversions of traditional schools in target status, or B, propose to open in cluster tiers in which capacity is projected to exceed 120% as of fall 2017. The board passed the resolution by vote of the whole. The language of the resolution is clear and unequivocal. A resolution is a complex motion that creates policy for the district. We can now all comment individually on what we believe is best, but the board acted strategically last fall and spoke with one voice when we voted. The Office of Innovation disregarded the board's resolution and recommended a charter school that meets neither of the priorities set forth in the resolution. Because the Strive application meets neither of the priorities, it should be denied. The board, not the Office of Innovation and not a charter review committee, decides what is, quote, "not contrary to the best interest of the pupil, school district, or community," end quote. That's the statutory language. Policy governance dictates that the board is to determine district policy and priorities, and administration is to carry them out. As elected officials, we are tasked with determining what is in the best interest of students, the district, and the community, and we speak through our policies and resolutions. Since MNPS is financially unable to open unlimited numbers of schools each year, it is in the best interest of students for us to consider and articulate our highest and most pressing needs on a yearly basis. We did so this year. It is not in the best interest of students for district employees to disregard a well-thought-out and articulated vision for charter growth. It is not in the best interest of students for district employees to substitute their judgment for that of elected representatives of the community. The district's failure to follow a clear board directive was disrespectful of this board, and it was wasteful of district resources. Furthermore, it sets a bad precedent for future charter applicants who, like this applicant, will feel free to disregard the needs of our district as defined by the board through policy. To approve this application tonight would undermine the board's authority and ability to identify and meet our highest needs, and therefore would not be in the best interest of students. And I'll just add this on a personal note. Really, this entire process has felt very dishonest to me. I have lost trust in this process. I've lost trust in our administrators. And, we're getting information that's being shipped out to us 2 to 3 hours before a meeting. It feels very strongly like this is just being set up as for a state appeal by the language, by the sudden changes, by this new information that's being floated out. And I think we're going to have to work on rebuilding that trust.
Ms. Shepherd.
So I'm conflicted. Last spring, I started having community members come up to me and ask me what I thought about the new charter school, middle school that was being talked about by Ms. Butler and several of the community leaders. And my honest answer to them was, I didn't know anything about it. So I had the questions come to me so often, I tired of the question and the answer, so I changed my answer to, why don't you have Ms. Butler contact me? I find it curious, if not interesting, curious and interesting tactic, knowing that the person who represents the McGavitt cluster does have the final vote, does have a vote on whether or not this school is approved for that cluster. So I really think that, personally, if the shoe were on the other foot, I probably would have done it the other way around, just so I could sell that particular representative on an idea that I had to help the students in her cluster. I think that might have been a better way to go about that. And I find it also interesting that after repeatedly stating and then finally passing a resolution in November to have charter school applicants either take a turnaround situation or open a charter school in the southeastern portion of our county, where we have the greatest population growth, that those directions were unheeded or ignored. To me, it appears that they just snubbed their collective noses at our directions when we specifically stated that we knew where we wanted these schools, and yet they went ahead with their actions. So I'm wondering if they have the best interests of our students at heart, or if they're really primarily interested in their application. 2 years ago, right around this time, we had newly elected board members to the Board of Education who began their tenure around another contentious charter school applicant with an attitude. Since that time, our state legislature has taken away local control. The statewide authorizer bill gives the State Department of Education the right to dictate to local boards to approve charter schools that have been denied on a local level. However, local taxpayers will be paying for the State Department of Ed decision to open said charter school. My personal opinion is that local boards of education know their local municipalities better than any state Department of Education does. This decision needs to be made on a local basis. The 2 schools that MNPS were mandated to open by the state DOE were failures, and we ended up closing them. That is a very, very difficult decision to make. I have neither the patience nor the taste for the state to dictate to me or us on a local level to approve the school. If I vote to approve the school, I will be doing so keeping in mind these points of contention that I've just made. Now, having stated these points, I will say that I'm painfully keeping in mind that 2 of the middle schools in the McGavock cluster are focus schools, and that there's disparity around the scores for 2 separate groups, and those being the students who are English learners or those students who come from a high poverty level. We can't fail those children at all. Those are our highest need students, and they need to be served just like all the other students, if not better. I'm not quite convinced that this applicant is ready to open a school in those conditions. I have a lot of questions around that. Will they recruit from our neediest students? We have a high population of students at Two Rivers Middle School from the Napier Housing Products. Those are very high need students. Will they provide transportation for these students? Will they provide transportation for the parents? Well, what will happen if the parents sign a contract saying that they will be involved parents, but then cannot or will not complete that requirement? How will they define what a successful student means to them? When will they make the decision to cull those students that don't meet their expectation of a successful student? Our students, our children, our families deserve a very thoughtful approach for opening any school, whether it be a zone school or a charter school. The bottom line is that our students are the ones we hurt the most anytime we have to shut our school, any school. Dr. Register has extended the proverbial olive branch in having MNPS work with the charter school community. We must work hand in hand to provide what is best for each and every student in each and every school. We must work toward a budgetary harmony to be able to providing the charter schools that we have and those that we have approved as part of school choice for MNPS. So now you understand why I'm so conflicted, because I'm speaking on both sides of the aisle. But bottom line is, I make the decision on what's best for each and every student in our schools, because that is my focus. That is my laser focus. And if we have to close a school, the parents and the teachers they'll survive. But what bothers me the most, and we've had to do it, is the students in those seats. They've lost their families, and I can't ignore that. It's a very gut-wrenching decision. So, I'm done preaching.
Dr. Brannon.
Originally, when our first charter school was established, we did not have the oversight team and monitoring that we have at this time. The process of application was not as rigorous, nor did it give as thorough a review as it does now. I'm looking at the possibility of students being able to be successful at the school that is applying today. And I do want oversight locally. So in light of the fact that we will have that ability to monitor, I am leaning toward the approval process. But I want some assurances on the part of the school in terms of transportation for students, in terms of being able to welcome parents and get the parents to your facilities, in terms of representing our system as a public school that is geared toward academic achievement for all. It is a hard decision, and I want what is best for children. And that is my purpose in being here, and that's pretty much where I am.
Thank you. Dr. Coverstone, if you would kindly entertain a couple of questions for me. But first, I'd like, Ms. Sundbeck, would you come up to the mic, please? I'd like to get some clarification from you for this board on resolution versus policy.
Okay. Both are, a resolution's a motion, and as Ms. Rogue said, it's a complex motion, which means that it's something with whereas clauses, which generally takes more time to consider. It's more kind of thought out than just a motion on the floor. But that doesn't, it's the same dignity as any other motion. So, for example, a resolution can't bind the board to future votes, so you can't say that because the board passes a resolution, that means that the resolution says the board shall not consider, but state law says that the board has to vote up or down on a charter school. So you can't be bound by a resolution to not vote on future motions. So a motion, whether to vote the charter school up or down, is of equal dignity as the resolution. So the board is still required to act. If the board doesn't act, then that's deemed approved. So the board needs to act. And just so you know, a 4-4 vote would be approval because it would be a failure to act. So that's not clear, but there's a Solid Waste Regions Board case that's directly on point that says you have to vote. There's a majority of. I sent you guys the statute that says that it takes a majority of the entire board to pass something. And so you have to make a motion to either approve or deny on a charter school. If you make a motion to approve and that fails because there's not a majority of the entire board because it's 4-4, and then you make a motion to deny and it doesn't pass because it's 4-4, that's deemed a failure to act. And under this particular statute, a failure to act is deemed approved. So the board just needs to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions about the law?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Dr. Coverstone, a couple of questions for you. How many charter applications have we approved since the Office of Innovation, or since charters have been in this district?
All of our charters, I believe the number is 21, headed toward 25. 25 approved.
And how many of those approvals have failed?
4.
4. And we've closed 2 of those.
We've closed 4.
4 of those, I'm sorry. 4. All 4 schools have been closed. Okay. So I'll go back to what Ms. Kim said earlier. You guys have a pretty solid record on reviewing applications and presenting those applications to this Board of Education. Your recommendations have been, for the most part, spot on. Of those 4 that have closed, I believe 2 of those were authorized by the state, or basically forced upon us by the state. So again, I'll go back to your record. It's been pretty spot on now. There's a lot of discussion at this table about location. In your opinion, and clearly I have your opinion, but I'd like for you to just restate it for me. In your opinion, is this a viable application?
Yes.
Okay. The expectation from your office is that if this application is approved, it will serve the children of this city quite well. The expectation is that we will have educational opportunities presented to them that could increase the overall academic success of these children.
Yes.
Okay. Again, we go back to location. Now, the reason I keep saying that is because I think it's relatively important to understand that just because we ask a school to locate in a particular area of town does not mean that that school is going to enroll students in that particular area of town. If I'm correct, we do not have the authority to dictate who gets enrolled in these schools. Is that correct?
We can work that out with them if we would like,
But
and
what
this
I'm
is
saying
their
is
mission, but
we-
no, we can't
We
outright.
can't dictate that they can only choose students from a particular area of town. We can request that they locate in a particular area of town. Is that correct? Okay, and which is what this resolution basically says, is that we want you to locate in the most overly populated areas of our city to serve the children who are most at need. Curious to me is that it doesn't always mean that the children who are most at need are necessarily just in one area of town. That's where the population growth is. That does not necessarily mean that that every child in that area are the most at need. Now, having said that, I looked at this application a couple of times. I looked at it the first time that it came to us, and I looked at it a couple of times since we've gotten the revised copy. And I know most of you are going to find this hard to believe, but I completely agree with Mr. Pinkston that this is like night and day from where we came to where it was when it was originally submitted to where we are now. And it's a great application. When I reread it, it's a great application, which really surprised me because my first thought was, if they could do this on a second writing, why wasn't it done the first time? And that was kind of one of the first things that jumped out at me. And I've heard your comments too. I think, you've made a comment about great leadership. We all know that great leadership can dictate the path of any school. Shameless plug here, look at our own Dr. Koger, whose school, Antioch High School, just became a reward school. Shameless plug. But leadership makes a difference. It makes a huge difference in any school that is going to be in our district. It makes a difference in who you hire. It makes a difference in how your parents interact with your schools. It makes a difference in how your teachers and your assistant principals and your cafeteria workers and your groundskeepers, it makes a difference in how all those people interact in your school. So quality, more than quality, exceptional leadership is a must. And so, I think it's absolutely fantastic that, based on what you said, Ms. Kim, Ms. Butler has gone through the reins of learning the hard way how to be part of and operate a charter school. I think that's fantastic. So what I'll say is this. Again, I've reread this. Well, one other thing, too, about the resolution. The resolution, thank you, Ms. Sinback, for the clarification. The thing that I had to go back and reread this, too, because there was so much about it going on. The one word that sticks out in this resolution for me is consider. And every be it further resolved, there is the word consider. And I think this Board of Education has gone over and above to consider these applications that have come before us and to really think about, very strategically think about where we want to place these schools because of where we are in our district and the growth in our city. And so I'm looking at this and, we consider the charter school applications, we consider this, we consider that. And so in putting all of this together, I'll say this. It came down to me to two things, or one thing actually. Do we put educational or academic success above location, or do we put location above academic success of our children? And I will agree with Dr. Brannon. The only reason that I ever decided to sit in this seat was because of our children. And if that means that we serve the children by any means necessary, I don't want us to make a misstep on educating our children based on location of a school. If this application is what it says it is, and they will do what they say they're going to do in this application, then I commend them, because it means that our children are going to go from here to there. But if at any point, anything in this application fails, then shame on them for putting our children at risk again. So I think I was like Ms. Shepherd on a lot of this. It was just concerning to me. First of all, I'll go back to, how is it that we couldn't get this application the first time out? That was the number one thing that concerned me. The second thing is, on the resubmit, looks great, looks fantastic. And I will say again that your office has done a fantastic job in recommending charters for this district. But it goes back to what's best for the children, what's absolutely best for the children. And if I have to choose academic success over location, then I would do that in a heartbeat for these children. So I'm still right now kind of out there, but we'll see. All right, Mr. Pinkston.
Thank you. I'd like to get some clarification from Ms. Sinback regarding something she said a minute ago. Ms. Sinback, you kind of volunteered some scenario on a 4-4 vote count, which makes me sound like somebody's been counting votes here, but you said in a 4-4.
I was actually reading Joey Garrison's tweets. So.
Oh, all right. Well, whatever. All right. So
Joey's counting votes.
Joey's counting votes.
Way to go, Joey.
Joey's counting votes.
He thought 4-4 was meant denied.
So it's good that we go ahead and have this conversation now, because if 4-4, if there were to be a split because we're missing our 9th member, then there's a motion on the floor to approve the charter school. Should that fail to get a majority, then doesn't that equate to denial?
No, you have to either approve or deny, and you have to vote. You have to have a majority of the, not just the quorum, but a majority of the entire board to take an action. And if you don't take an action to approve and you don't take an action to deny by a majority of the total board, then that's a failure to act. Right. And the way this particular statute is, a failure to act equals approval.
Okay. All right. So something else I want to say. The resolution that we articulated by a vote of 7-1 last year was not only about location. We also invited charter operators to convert persistently failing schools. One of the issues I've had with the charter movement all along is I think it's...
Is this for me?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll sit down.
Thank you for your time.
Go back to reading Joey's tweets.
One of the weaknesses of the charter movement at large is that it's an inefficient way to reform the system. They set out to reform it 100 kids at a time, generally speaking. Meanwhile, as we saw from this week's articulated report from the state about the priority schools, we have 6,300 kids in 15 failing schools. I would invite this operator, as I have on multiple occasions, to rethink the approach, come back with a conversion application that it attempts to do more and to help more kids go farther faster than what you're articulating here. So again, that conversion priority has been out there all along. This isn't just about location. I want to echo Ms. Froeg's comments about trust or lack of trust in this process. The idea that Dr. Coverstone and Dr. Register would participate in the development of these priorities and then throw them overboard out of political expediency, to me, undermines the entire trust that we're supposed to be having working in this process. And it's now abundantly clear to me how the Great Hearts meltdown happened. I think the process suffers from a lack of leadership. Now, regardless of the culture problems that we've got, I think we have gone overboard to try to work with this particular applicant who comes to us via the Tennessee Charter School Center, the same organization that pushed for the state charter authorizer to strip this board of local control. We encourage this operator to rethink the approach and bring us a proposal that speaks to the district's stated needs. On 2 occasions this past spring, Dr. Register and Dr. Coverstone and I, before they decided to go in a different direction without telling anybody, met with this applicant, urged them to reconsider their approach. What they told us both times is that MNPS's priorities don't fit their business model, to which we responded, it's not our job to bend to your business model, it's your job to bring us something that speaks to the stated needs of this school system. And they refused. So it's not like we haven't been trying to work with this organization. Now, putting all aside that history, given the evaluation team's scathing report on this proposal less than 2 months ago, Dr. Coverstone, I don't see how this operator could possibly be ready for prime time. The multitude of deficiencies that the evaluation team called out were more than just technical problems with the application. The evaluators questioned this operator's basic capacity to deliver and whether the operator even understands the significant challenges in starting a new school. The team's list, your team's list of criticisms was too long to fully recite tonight, but I'll call out a few of the more serious concerns. Number 1, educational plan, and I'm quoting from your team. It is unclear throughout the application if the proposed school understands and can accommodate both special needs students and EL, English language students. The applicant stated in the interview that the same instructional strategies work for both groups, which led the review team to question whether the applicant has an awareness of the difference between these disciplines and the training to be successful with either group. Moreover, this is, again, your team's quote, there are significant concerns that the chosen school leader does not have the expertise needed in special education law and requirements. That was one big red flag. Second, organizational plan, quote, your team, There is a concern the school leader is spread too thin and will not be able to perform the duties assigned to her with fidelity. When pressed on the concern in the interview, the answers given did not give the review team confidence that the school leader understood the enormity of the time commitment for the duties assigned to her. Additionally, quote, there was no evidence of specific plans to recruit economically disadvantaged families, the Great Hearts problem. Worst of all, quote, the review team was not confident that the school has emergency plans in place, nor a cohesive plan for arrival, dismissal, and overall safety. And the third big red flag that jumped out was evidence of capacity. Quote, there are enough questions about this application that the review team does not have confidence that the applicant can successfully start and sustain a high-performing school. So I could go on, but suffice to say, it was a pretty scathing review. It's really hard to see how this operator could have suddenly conjured up expertise and organizational capacity that apparently didn't exist less than 60 days ago. In my opinion, approving this application tonight would not only be contrary to the district's stated needs, it would be setting up this operator and students and families for failure. So just to recap, we tried to work with this applicant. We offered the hand of partnership. They ignored our outreach and then turned around and brought us a plan that didn't even come close to being ready for prime time. This thing is half-baked at best, and of course, based on the totality of conversations, I'm voting no. Thank you.
Any final thoughts before we ask for the vote? Ms. Frog.
All right, I've got 3 points. First of all, there seems to be a fear of state oversight of these schools, and it appears that there are some people sitting here tonight who may not necessarily be in favor of this, but are very afraid that the state will oversee the school, so it would be better just for us to open it just so we can have control. So I want to remind people of what the new state law says. It says that if we deny the school and it is appealed and the state opens it, there are 2 options. The state can oversee the school, or we can make an agreement with this charter school for our local district to oversee it. And also, with regard to that point, I really don't think we should ever be voting based on fear of what the state may or may not do. We've got to vote based on what we think is best for our district, what is best for students in our district, and because we don't know what the state's going to do. Number 2, I agree with Will's recent comments about, academic success. I think there's a lot of talk about, just because it's a charter school, it's going to do wonderfully. And we all know that some do well, some don't. So we shouldn't base, our vote on the fact that this is a new charter school for this district that has never had one. Number 3, the resolution, I want to remind everybody of the language of our own resolution that we voted on in fall. And it said, be it further resolved, the board will only consider charter school applications in 2014 that address one of the aforementioned priorities, the 2 priorities that I mentioned. So if we vote tonight to approve this charter school that flies in the face of our own resolution, that our own administration has recommended in the face of our own resolution that was carefully crafted, that was crafted in conjunction with the Office of Innovation, that was crafted in conjunction with Dr. Register, what is the point of ever having another resolution? I mean, we're basically saying, we made this resolution, but come on, bring whatever applications you want, because we might change our mind in the spring. It makes us a very weak board, and we're not, and it doesn't give us, we are not setting clear expectations for applications. And that's what we should do, and that's what we do through policy. So if we vote yes on this, we have disregarded our own rules that we set forth in the fall. And that's it, that's all.
Dr. Brannon?
With the charter application process, it would not be possible for the administrators to dictate to the committee how to vote or what to give credence to in their application. He cannot go to, or Ms. Swan cannot go to the group and say, do not approve. If the corrections have been made in light of what has been brought to the attention of the group, the applicant, then we can see what a difference it can make, whether or not it is something that has been conjured up. I think they probably got advice from other groups and will be able to move through the process of beginning with a small number of students.
Hold on. Finish your thought. Okay. Ms. Frogan, then Mr. Pinkston.
Okay, so this is what I want to say. I think there's this notion that we have this sort of rogue committee that has made this application, and they just have to follow this process. We are the board that sets the policy for the district. The administration is supposed to follow that policy. So the fact that it got to this committee, and the committee was allowed to consider all these other factors when we said we only want these 2 factors to be considered. I don't mind if we get more information, that's fine, but we should never have our own administration approving or recommending for approval a charter school that meets none of the policy considerations we've set. So to me, that's the problem. That's where the breakdown occurred. I said this the other night. If we are to be the policy setting entity of this district, then the administration needs to follow that. And the fact that it got to this committee, now we have a big mess on our hands. We have a committee that's looked at other factors and other things and has just made its own decision. And when I read this application, there's language that indicates that the committee is now deciding what is in the best interest of students and the district. But that is our job as a board, not individually. We're going to disagree on that. But it's our job as a board to vote to determine the best interest. And the fact that it's gotten to this is the problem to me. So,
Mr. Pinkston, Ms. Shepherd, and then I think Mr. Coverstone has comments.
Yeah, I mean, what's it'd be different, Dr. Brandon, if this is something that we cooked up as a group of 9 members and handed down, but this was done collaboratively with Dr. Register and Dr. Coverstone. When we drafted it, I mean, I hit pause at the very end of the process and said, let's read this out loud, gentlemen, and let's make sure that everybody is in agreement with this before we move it to the board. And I did this, of course, as the liaison of the charter review process. Is there anything in this that's inaccurate? And the answer was no from both of these gentlemen. Is there anything in this that you think is bad policy? The answer is no from both of these gentlemen. Do you think this is the right approach? The answer was yes from both of these gentlemen. Now, something has happened in the interim to change both of their minds, apparently. And it was not, I suspect I know what it was, but I'm not going to cast aspersions today. Wait for another day. But the bottom line is this was a collaborative plan that was developed, not just with the input, but the guidance and to some extent, the leadership of Dr. Register and Dr. Coverstone. And the fact that they now have reversed course and gone in a different direction tells me that there really wasn't leadership in the process. And that's the thing that's most troubling. And as Ms. Froeg said, it is hard. And the people who I think this does a greatest disservice to were the operators who actually tried to partner with us and tried to work within the guidelines that we articulated. The process for the most part worked, except we have one recalcitrant operator that wants to become a test case for a new state law. And I think the whole thing has been broken in terms of process and leadership, and I don't mind having a procedural vote of up or down to satisfy the construct of state law, but the reality is we set out for the first time as a group to articulate to the market what we wanted and as a group and what we thought were in the best interest of the school system as a whole, and these ideas that were collaboratively developed were then thrown aside by Dr. Coverstone and his team and apparently Dr. Register. That's the part that I think is most troubling in terms of that trust factor that we talked about earlier.
Ms. Shepherd.
All right. About the resolution. The board passed a resolution. The board owns this resolution. The resolution applies to the board. The resolution does not apply to the Office of Innovation. It does not apply to anybody who works at central office. It's our resolution. It applies to us. So when they are looking at charter school applications, that's not part of their policy. It's our policy. It's not theirs.
No.
Hold on.
Wait, I just want to respond.
Let her finish. Are you finished, ma'am?
Yes.
The
Thank
board
you.
directs the management MNPS to develop a more deliberate and strategic process for evaluating and recommending charter school applications. We directed management. And the next clause says this new process shall establish 2 priorities. So this process applies to both the board and to management. It was not a singular application.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Coverstone, hold on, let Mr. Coverstone respond.
Clear on that, Mr. Pinkston. We did develop a process. We did establish those priorities. The board will consider applications is all the language that exists later on. I support articulating the priorities. I support these priorities. Largely, this has worked. You should take credit for its having worked. But I disagreed directly with you about exclusivity. And so I think it's disingenuous to portray this as some about face later on. Our job is to give honest, transparent, and complete judgment to you so that you vote with your eyes open. But it's up to you. You definitely can vote either way. That is your decision. The only people who are prohibited from considering are you. You want us to give you good advice. You didn't want us to hide the application and say, you shouldn't vote on it. That would be disingenuous and wrong. Further, you didn't want us only to consider those 2 things and throw aside whether the school could work or not. An applicant who applied for the elementary school cluster that was terrible was denied because we considered the quality of the school. You don't want us just to say, yep, it's located in the elementary tier in Glencliff and recommend approval.
Know that we articulated as part of this work that we would have high standards in the approval process in addition to articulating those 2 priorities. The question I've got is there seems to be some assumption now that this school will be a good school because there's been this magical turnaround in 60 days. What has substantively changed about this organization over the last 60 days? Is there a new school leader? Is there a new set of capacity that they brought to the table? Is there new
Yes.
Make the case.
Yes, restructured around a director of operations to address the concerns related to operations that you were describing, detailed suggestions about recruiting and transportation, as well as detailed additions on curriculum and instruction. The same committee, which has, I would say, reviewed close to 80 applications in its time as a committee, and as committee members over the years, 80 applications among that group.
So
they wrote it, then they were satisfied. We don't have a part in that.
So let's take it one at a time. It is unclear, according to your team, that the application, it's unclear that the proposed school understands and can accommodate both special needs students and EL students. The applicant stated in an interview the same instructional strategies work for both groups, which led the review team to question whether the applicant has an awareness of the difference between these disciplines. What changed over the last 60 days to fix that, to cure that?
Extensive detail in the curriculum and instruction plans demonstrating that the knowledge and the practice was there to know the difference and know how to act.
Organizational plan. There's a concern that the school leader is spread too thin and will not be able to perform the duties assigned to her with fidelity. When pressed on this concern in the interview, the answers given did not give the review team confidence that the school leader understood the enormity of the time commitment and the duties assigned to her. Additionally, there was no evidence of specific plans to recruit economically disadvantaged families. What has changed?
Specific plans included a director of operations and systems in place to share the burden and to operate the school.
And the school leader now understands the enormity of the time commitment and the duties assigned to her when she didn't 60 days ago?
Absolutely, and that is detailed in the plans and the systems that were established in the application.
I mean, I guess I'm asking what actually changed from when the first review was conducted and the second, substantively, beyond hiring an operational director?
That's pretty significant. And then the descriptions of the systems and the responses to the questions, which revealed that indeed she does know what she's talking about, indeed she does know how to run that system, and which drew from her experience to demonstrate that.
The review team does not have the confidence that the applicant can successfully start and sustain a high-performing school. So other than the hiring of an operations director, what else?
So let me interrupt for just a second here, Mr. Coverstone. So the questions that Mr. Pinkston is asking, in the amended application review analysis, are you providing the same answers at the podium that are in this application? Okay, so Mr. Pinkston, I'm confused about, the answers are here.
I don't think there was anything in the application that says We thought before that the school leader was not qualified, and now she is, and here are the reasons why. That's the basic question I'm getting to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, that's why we have the experienced committee to test it against what they thought before. They have extensive experience at doing this and a good track record. That's why we don't substitute our judgment for theirs on the question of school quality.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coverstone. I'm going to call for the vote.
Can I say?
comments?
Yeah.
We are going to beat this thing to death.
Yeah, well-
And we're going to call for the vote now. And if we have any issues, then we'll come back to it at a later time. So, I will call you by name, and I would appreciate you telling me yea or nay. The motion's been made and properly second to...
Read the motion again, please.
Absolutely. Ms. Shepherd, would you please read your motion again?
I move to approve the recommendation for Strive Collegiate Academy amended charter application.
Thank you. Dr. Brannon?
Yes.
Ms. Spearing?
No.
Ms. Kim?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Pinkston?
No.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Froh?
No.
Application is approved, 4-3. Thank you.
Supposed to be 5.
Oh, no, it has to be a majority?
5.
I thought, we have to do 5 at this table, or do we have to have the majority of the?
It has to be 5. It has to be 5.
Mays? Yes. Now it's approved. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.